My name is Eleanor Wilson. I'm 68 years old, and I discovered my son and his wife were planning to seize my assets and put me in a home. What they didn't know was that I was one step ahead of them, and I was about to teach them the most expensive lesson of their lives. It's a long story, but it's one I feel I have to tell. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're all reading this from and what time it is in your part of the world. It makes me feel a little less alone in all this. Thank you for being here and for listening. The scent of roast chicken, seasoned with rosemary from my own garden, usually filled my small home with a sense of peace. Sunday dinners had been a tradition for decades, a constant in a world that never stopped changing. It started with my beloved husband, Richard, at the head of the table, his booming laugh making the silverware dance. After he passed 10 years ago, it was just me and our son, Michael. And for the last 10 years, since his wedding, it had been me, Michael, and his wife, Vanessa. That particular Sunday started like any other. The table was set with the good china, the one I only used for family. Michael was talking about his job at the logistics firm, something about a big promotion he was hoping for, while Vanessa was scrolling through her phone, occasionally murmuring, "That's nice, dear," without looking up. My grandson, 8-year-old Jamie, was quietly building a tower out of sugar packets, a small island of innocence in the growing sea of my unease. It was when I went to the sideboard to get the gravy boat that I saw it. Or rather, what I didn't see. The centerpiece of my mantel, the heart of my living room, had always been a large silver-framed photograph of Richard and me on our wedding day. It was the first thing you saw when you walked in, a testament to 45 years of love and partnership. Now, it was gone. In its place stood a sleek, black digital frame cycling through flashy, overly filtered pictures of Michael, Vanessa, and Jamie on a recent trip to Florida. My wedding picture, the one Richard had polished every anniversary, had been moved to a small end table in the corner, partially obscured by a lamp whose shade Vanessa had once called hopelessly dated. A cold stillness settled over me. This wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally move a 5-pound silver frame that has occupied the same spot for 20 years. This was a statement, a territorial marking. I carried the gravy to the table, my hand miraculously steady, my face a mask of practiced calm. I sat down and unfolded my napkin. "Vanessa," I said, my voice even and light, "I see you put up that new frame you bought. It's very modern." Vanessa looked up from her phone, a bright, artificial smile plastered on her face. "Oh, I did. Do you like it, Eleanor? I just thought we should liven the place up a bit, update the vibe." She waved a dismissive hand toward the corner. "That old picture was so formal. And besides, Richard has been gone for a while now." The casual cruelty of her words, the way she spoke my husband's name as if he were an old piece of furniture, hung in the air. Richard has been gone for a while now, as if a lifetime of love could be packed away like old holiday decorations. I looked at my son, my only child, expecting him to say something, to defend his father's memory. He just stared at his plate, meticulously cutting his chicken into smaller and smaller pieces, his silence a betrayal far louder and more painful than her words. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. My jaw tightened. The tines of my fork pressed into the floral pattern of the tablecloth, leaving small indentations. I took a slow breath, the way Richard had taught me when the old machinery at the factory would jam. "Don't let them see you sweat, Allie," he used to say. "Hold your ground. Quietly." I said, "The frame is lovely," my voice dangerously sweet, "but the picture of your father and me belongs on the mantel. It has always been there, and it will remain there." Vanessa's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of annoyance crossed her features before being replaced by saccharine compliance. "Of course, Eleanor. I was just trying to help." The rest of the dinner was a blur of meaningless chatter. I don't remember what we ate or what we said.
All I could feel was the cold fury solidifying in my chest. This wasn't about decor. This was about erasure. This was a deliberate, calculated move to diminish my past, to diminish me, to make me a guest in my own home, in my own life. They didn't just want my money, they wanted to erase the woman who had earned it. They wanted to erase the memory of the man who had built this life with me. I remember a conversation with Richard years ago when Michael was in college. He had come home for the summer with a new, entitled attitude. "He has a soft streak, Allie," he said, looking out the kitchen window as Michael sped off in the car we'd bought him. "He's a good boy, but he wants the easy way. He'll need a strong partner to keep him on the right path, or a weak one will lead him down the wrong one." It was a prophecy I hadn't understood until now. Vanessa wasn't just leading him, she was driving him. After they left, after the hollow echo of goodbye faded, I walked over to the end table. I picked up the heavy silver frame. My fingers traced Richard's smiling face. I carried it back to the mantel, placing it firmly in the center, moving the digital intruder to the side. I stood there for a long time, looking at the two of us, young and full of dreams, the life we built together surrounding me. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of memories paid for with Richard's overtime and my double shifts, with scraped knees and bedtime stories, with laughter and with tears. I won't let them do this, Richard. I promise you. And in that moment, I knew this was no longer a family squabble. It was a war. And I had no intention of losing. The next morning, the sun streamed into my kitchen, but it didn't bring warmth. The previous night's anger had cooled into a hard, clear resolution. I was in my garden, my hands buried in the familiar soil, my phone pressed to my ear. The scent of damp earth was a comfort, a connection to something real and honest. "It was a declaration of war, Sarah, plain and simple," I said. Sarah Jenkins, my best friend of 40 years, didn't mince words. "Of course it was. Cut the crap, Eleanor. You know what Vanessa is. She's a piranha in a sundress. The question is, what are you going to do about it?"
Sarah had been an ER nurse. She had a knack for cutting straight to the heart of a problem, whether it was a compound fracture or a manipulative daughter-in-law. There was no sugarcoating with Sarah, and right now, that's what I needed. "I'm not going to react," I said, yanking a stubborn weed from the ground with satisfying force. "I'm going to set the board." "What does that mean? Don't get all cryptic on me, Ellie." "It means I'm not as naive as they think I am," I told her. "I saw this coming, Sarah. Maybe not the photograph, but the attitude. The way they talk about my house as an investment. The way Michael's eyes glaze over when I talk about the old days. The little comments from Vanessa about how much easier life would be if they had a bigger safety net. I had a preliminary chat with David Chen a few months ago. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "David, your lawyer?" "The one and only," I confirmed. "I just wanted to understand my options. I didn't do anything then. I was hoping I was wrong, that it was all in my head." I sighed, the sound heavy in the morning air. I wasn't wrong. Vanessa just handed me the proof, gift-wrapped. Sarah was silent for a moment. I could picture her in her own tidy kitchen, a thoughtful frown on her face. We had seen friends go through this before, messy situations after a spouse's death, children suddenly feeling entitled. We'd seen one friend, Martha, lose her home in a nasty legal battle after a second marriage ended in a bitter divorce. The lessons were there, written in the cautionary tales of our peers. We had promised each other we would be smarter. "Good for you, Ellie," Sarah said finally, her voice firm with conviction. "You worked your entire life for what you have. Richard worked himself into an early grave for it. Don't you let that blood-sucking leech get her hands on it." "I won't," I said. "They think they're playing checkers. They're about to find out I've been playing chess." We hung up, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My love for Michael was a deep, aching thing, a mother's love that doesn't simply vanish, But the man who sat silently while his wife disrespected his father's memory was a stranger to me. My priority now was protecting the legacy Richard and I had built, not just for myself, but for Jamie. That little boy deserved a future, a college fund, a foundation built on something more solid than their parents' greed. Later that week, I called David Chen's office and made a formal appointment. Not a preliminary chat, but a strategy session. I spent the next few days gathering documents, deeds, bank statements, investment portfolios. Laying them all out on my dining room table, I saw not just numbers, but a story. The story of a young couple who started with nothing, who saved every penny from my factory salary and Richard's construction gigs. The story of a life built on sacrifice and foresight. I wasn't just protecting assets. I was defending my life's work. The battle lines had been drawn over a Sunday dinner with a roast chicken growing cold on the table. And I was ready. I just needed to wait for them to make their next move. And I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait long. The next move came sooner than I'd expected, and it was far more cunning than I'd given them credit for. It didn't come as a direct demand or a clumsy suggestion. It came wrapped in the guise of responsible, forward-thinking family planning. It was a Tuesday evening. I was watching the news when the phone rang. It was Michael. His voice was smooth, dripping with a manufactured concern that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Mom, how are you feeling?" he began. The classic opening of a conversation that's about anything but how I'm feeling. "I'm fine, Michael. Just watching the news," I said, my tone neutral, betraying nothing. That's good. A pause perfectly timed for dramatic effect. "Listen, Vanessa and I have been doing a lot of thinking lately about the future, for us, for Jamie. We want to be responsible." "That's good to hear," I said, my eyes fixed on the television screen, not seeing a thing. "Yeah, well, we're actually meeting with an estate planner next week, a really top-notch guy, highly recommended, just to get our affairs in order, make sure Jamie's college fund is structured right, that sort of thing. And we were thinking it would be great if you came with us, just to listen in, to make sure everything in the family is aligned, that we're all protected." There it was. Not a clumsy, direct assault like, "Mom, add me to your bank accounts." This was a Trojan horse, beautifully constructed and wheeled right up to my front door. It was an invitation I couldn't refuse without looking paranoid, difficult, or uncooperative. It was brilliant in its insidious design, and it made me feel sick to my stomach. They were going to use a third-party professional to corner me, to make their greed look like prudent financial planning. My mind raced, connecting the dots. This was their coordinated attack. The flipped photograph was the psychological opening salvo, designed to unsettle me. This invitation was the main assault, designed to legally disarm me. I let the silence hang for a beat, long enough for him to get a little nervous. "Mom? Are you there?" Then I smiled. It was a cold, thin smile that he couldn't see. "Michael," I said, injecting a note of surprised warmth into my voice. "That's a wonderful idea, truly. I've been thinking I need to get more organized myself. It would be a relief to have you there to help me navigate all that legal jargon." The audible sigh of relief on his end was my confirmation. He thought he'd won. He thought his dear old mother was finally seeing reason, finally ready to be led. "Oh, great, Mom. That's fantastic. Vanessa will be so pleased. We were just so worried, It's next Thursday at 10. I'll send you the address. The planner's name is Mr. Peterson. I'll mark it on my calendar. Thank you for thinking of me, son. It means a lot." We hung up, and the mask of pleasantry dropped from my face. They had set the date for the battle. Now I had to prepare my defenses. The very next morning, I was sitting across from David Chen in his quiet, book-lined office. The smell of old paper and leather was comforting, a scent of order and law. I laid out the situation, finishing with Michael's sweet invitation. David, a man with kind eyes and a mind as sharp as a tack, leaned back in his chair. He didn't look surprised. It's a classic maneuver, Eleanor. They create a high-pressure environment, bring in a so-called neutral party who is actually on their payroll, and make you feel like you're being unreasonable if you don't comply. They'll talk about love and family, but the documents will all be about control and access. So what do? I asked, my hands clasped in my lap.
We don't just build a wall, Eleanor, he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. We build a fortress with a very, very clever trapdoor. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. We're going to create the Eleanor Wilson Family Legacy Trust, and it's going to be ironclad. He spent the next hour explaining the details. The trust would be irrevocable, meaning it couldn't be changed without a monumental legal effort. I would be the sole trustee for my lifetime, giving me complete control. All my major assets, the house, the savings, the investment portfolio, would be moved into it. And now for the beautiful part, David said, his eyes twinkling with the pleasure of a master craftsman describing his finest work. He pointed to a paragraph on his legal pad. We're going to include a custom-drafted coercion clause. It will state, in no uncertain terms, that any beneficiary who attempts to exert undue influence, pressure, or otherwise coerce the trustee into altering the trust or relinquishing control of its assets will be immediately and permanently disinherited. I stared at him, letting the beautiful, vicious genius of it sink in. So, by trying to take everything, they will legally guarantee they get nothing, he finished. It's a legal mousetrap, Eleanor, and they are walking right towards the cheese, whistling a happy tune. I felt a surge of power, a feeling I hadn't had in years. I wasn't a victim waiting for the inevitable. I was a strategist. I was a fighter. Let's do it, I said, my voice clear and strong. Let's build that fortress. In the 2 weeks leading up to the meeting, my life became a quiet flurry of strategic activity. David Chen and his team worked swiftly to draft the trust documents, a fortress of legal language designed to be impregnable. Meanwhile, I began the methodical process of retitling my assets. Each phone call to a bank or investment firm was a small victory, another brick laid in my fortress wall. It was tedious work, but with every signature, I felt a growing sense of control. But this wasn't just a legal exercise, it was a mental one. David insisted we role-play the meeting. He wanted me to be prepared for anything they might throw at me. He would sit across his large mahogany desk and transform into their lawyer, a slick, fast-talking shark named Mr. Peterson. My job was to stay calm, to deflect, and to control the narrative. Mrs. Wilson, he would say, his voice changing to a sharp, impatient tone. My clients are simply trying to help you secure your future. They are concerned about your ability to manage such a complex portfolio alone. Surely you can see the logic in consolidating your assets under Michael's guidance. His recent promotion shows he's more than capable. The first time he did it, I faltered. The implication that I was old and incompetent, the very thing I feared they thought, threw me off balance. I've been managing my own affairs for years, I stammered, feeling defensive. Exactly, David as Peterson pounced, and that's admirable. But the market has changed. It's more aggressive now. You need an aggressive strategy, managed by someone in their prime. Don't take the bait, Eleanor, David said, switching back to his own kind voice. They want you flustered. They want you emotional. Your power is in your stillness. They will say you are old. They will imply you are frail. They will suggest you are confused. You are none of those things. You are the trustee. You are the queen on the chessboard. You do not have to justify your decisions to them. Let's try again. We did it over and over. I learned to meet his aggressive questions with calm, simple, and infuriatingly polite answers. My finances are in excellent order, thank you. That's an interesting perspective. I'll certainly take it under advisement. I appreciate your concern, but I am quite comfortable with my current arrangements. With each rehearsal, I grew more confident. I was forging armor not of steel, but of composure. I was Eleanor Wilson, the woman who had faced down factory foremen, bank loan officers, and the grief that threatened to swallow her whole. I could certainly handle my son and his grasping wife. During this time, Vanessa made her own move, a flanking maneuver designed to soften me up before the main assault. She showed up at my door one afternoon, unannounced, carrying a Tupperware container of what she claimed was homemade banana bread. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her smile watery. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. She sat at my kitchen table, the very same one that my family had shared thousands of meals, and she began her tale of woe. She talked about the rising cost of living, the unexpected car repairs, the astronomical cost of a good summer camp for Jamie. "I just worry so much, Eleanor," she said, her voice catching. She put her hand on mine across the table. It was cold as ice. "Michael works so hard, but it feels like we're always just treading water. I see this big, beautiful house, and I know how much it's worth. And I know what Richard left for you. I know he would have wanted us to be secure. He wouldn't want his only son to struggle." The audacity of it, to invoke my husband's name in her plea for a handout, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. He had despised entitlement. He believed you earned your keep and you didn't take what wasn't yours. He would have seen right through her pathetic act. "We all have our struggles, Vanessa," I said, gently pulling my hand away to pour her a cup of tea. I stood up and cut a slice of the banana bread. It was dry and clearly store-bought. She must have sensed the shift, the unbreachable wall she couldn't penetrate with her crocodile tears. Her waterworks dried up with remarkable speed. She left soon after, the Tupperware left on the counter like a forgotten prop. That visit was a gift. It stripped away any lingering sentimentality I might have had. My son had married a woman who saw love as a transaction and family as a resource to be exploited, and he was letting her lead the charge. As I cleaned up the kitchen, I thought about Jamie. I thought about the world he was growing up in, with parents who taught him whining and manipulation were tools for getting what they want. I thought about the values Richard and I tried to instill in Michael: honesty, hard work, integrity. Where had it all gone wrong? Was it the world that had changed him? Or was this weakness always there, waiting for someone like Vanessa to nurture it? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't let their poison seep into the next generation. My fight wasn't just for my own dignity anymore. It was for Jamie's soul. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, the house dark except for the soft glow of a single lamp. I looked at the photograph on the mantel, at Richard's smiling face. "Wish me luck, my love," I whispered. I wasn't asking for a miracle. I had already built my own.
It was 2 days before the scheduled meeting, the day Jamie came for his weekly visit. Usually, these Saturdays were my sanctuary, a few hours of pure, uncomplicated joy. We'd bake cookies or work in the garden, his childish chatter a balm to my soul. But on this day, a shadow hung over him. He was quiet, listless, pushing the cookie dough around with a fork instead of eagerly cutting out shapes. "What's on your mind, little man?" I asked gently, wiping a smudge of flour from his cheek. He looked up at me, his blue eyes, so much like Michael's when he was a boy, wide with a trouble too big for his small shoulders. He bit his lip, glancing nervously toward the door as if his parents might materialize out of thin air. He leaned closer across the kitchen island, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Grandma," he said, "Mommy was crying last night." My heart gave a little squeeze. I thought of Vanessa's performance in my kitchen. She was certainly getting a lot of mileage out of those tears. Oh dear, why was she crying? She was talking to Daddy in the kitchen. She said,
She said that if you don't sign the important paper at the big meeting, we'll have to move. His voice trembled and a tear welled up in the corner of his eye. She said we might be homeless and I won't get to see you anymore. The cookie cutter fell from my hand, clattering onto the linoleum floor. Of all the low, manipulative tactics I had imagined, this one was the most depraved. They were using their own child as an emotional weapon. They were poisoning his sense of security, filling his head with fears of abandonment and poverty, all to pressure me. It wasn't just about greed anymore. It was cruelty. I kneeled, pulling him into a hug. His small body felt tense with anxiety. "Oh, Jamie," I murmured into his hair, my own anger a hot protective fire in my chest. "You listen to me. That is absolutely not true. You will never be homeless, and you will always get to see your grandma. Always. Do you understand?" He nodded against my shoulder, but I could feel he was still scared. They had planted a seed of terror in him. I held him at arm's length, looking him straight in the eye. "Sometimes," I said, choosing my words with extreme care, "grown-ups say silly things when they're worried about money. It doesn't make them true. Your mom and dad are just trying to figure things out. But your home is safe, and this home," I said, tapping his chest and then my own, "our connection is the safest thing of all." He seemed to relax a little, reassured by the certainty in my voice. We finished the cookies, but the joy had gone out of it. My mind was reeling. The revelation changed the stakes entirely. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about protecting my grandson's emotional well-being from the very people who were supposed to be his protectors. It was a fight for his childhood. That evening, after I dropped Jamie home, I received another unexpected phone call. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Erilyn, it's Carol." It took me a second to place the name. Carol, Vanessa's mother. We had only met a handful of times, at the wedding and a few holidays. She was a quiet, weary-looking woman who always seemed to be fading into the wallpaper. "Carol, what a surprise," I said. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue," she said, her voice strained. I have to say something. My sister, she's friends with your neighbor Mary, and Mary told her that Vanessa was crying on your doorstep the other day." I stayed silent, waiting. Carol took a shaky breath. "I know my daughter, Erilyn. I know those tears. She learned how to cry to get what she wanted before she learned how to walk. She told me once, years ago, that she was worried Michael wasn't ambitious enough for her. I'm so sorry. I tried my best, but some things you just can't fix." She was rambling, her words tumbling out in a rush of guilt and regret. "I just wanted to tell you, don't fall for it. Whatever she's selling, don't buy it." "Thank you, Carol," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "That means a great deal to me." We hung up, and I sat by the phone for a long time. It was a sad sort of solidarity, a message from another mother, a quiet admission of failure, and a warning. It was the final piece of intelligence I needed. They weren't just a greedy couple. They were a team of manipulators, using tears, threats, and their own child as pawns in their disgusting game. And they thought I was an easy mark. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The morning of the meeting dawned gray and overcast, a perfect reflection of my mood. But it was a mood of steely determination, not of dread. The time for emotion was over. Today was about execution. My first call was not to my lawyer, but to my financial advisor, Mr. Gable. Arthur Gable was a man of the old school, meticulous, fiercely loyal, and someone who had managed the modest portfolio Richard and I had built since the 1990s. He had seen us through market downturns and celebrated our small successes. He was more than an advisor. He was a witness to our life's work. "It's Eleanor Wilson," I said, my voice crisp and clear. "Eleanor, always a pleasure. What can I do for you on this fine morning?" "I have a specific and time-sensitive instruction," I said. "I'm heading into a family financial meeting at 10 o'clock.
At exactly 10:30, I need you to execute a transfer. I've already sent you the signed paperwork via courier. I have it right here on my desk. Came in yesterday afternoon. At 10:30, I repeated, I want you to transfer $100,000 from my main investment account to the Richard Wilson Memorial Fund at the community hospital. And I need you to send a confirmation email of the donation to myself, my son Michael, and the office of a Mr. Peterson at Peterson Estate Planning. I've given you their addresses. There was a pause on the line, followed by a low whistle. Eleanor, he said, a note of admiration in his voice, that's a significant portion of your liquid assets. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything in my life. It's for the hospital's new cardiac wing. Richard would have liked that. He had died of a massive heart attack far too young. It felt right to use the money they were lusting after to honor the man who had helped earn it, to turn their greed into a force for good. Consider it done, Mr. Gable said, the loyalty in his voice a warm comfort. The email will be sent at 10:30 on the dot. My next call was to Carol. It was brief. Carol, it's Eleanor. I just wanted to thank you again for your advice. I'll be using it today.
Godspeed, Eleanor, she whispered, and hung up. With my final pieces in place, I turned my attention to myself. I showered and chose my outfit with the care of a general preparing for inspection. I didn't choose a power suit or anything severe. I chose a soft, lavender-colored cashmere sweater set, a gift from Richard years ago, and a simple string of pearls. I wanted to look exactly like what they expected: a gentle, well-preserved widow, a grandmother, harmless, deferential. I did my makeup, a little more than usual, making sure my eyes looked clear and bright. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman I was. 68 years old, with lines of laughter and grief etched around her eyes. But beneath the soft sweater, my spine was a rod of steel. I grabbed my handbag, a sturdy leather one, also a gift from Richard. Inside, next to my wallet and keys, was a slim, professional-looking folder. It contained a single, notarized, and officially filed copy of the Eleanor Wilson Family Legacy Trust. I walked out of my house, the one I had fought so hard for, and locked the door behind me. I wasn't going into a meeting. I was heading into a performance, and I was determined to give the performance of a lifetime. The drive to the lawyer's office was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just focused on my breathing, on the calmness that had settled deep within me. They thought they were leading me into a trap. In reality, I was leading them to judgment. I pulled into the parking lot of the sleek, modern office building. It was designed to be intimidating, all glass and steel, but I wasn't intimidated. I had faced worse things than a fancy building and a crooked lawyer. I thought of Jamie's worried face, and my resolve hardened. This wasn't just for me. It was for him. It was for Richard. It was for every quiet sacrifice and every hard-won dollar that had built the life they were so eager to dismantle. The show was about to begin. The offices of Peterson Estate Planning were exactly as I'd pictured: hushed, expensive, and sterile. The air smelled of money and lemon-scented polish. A receptionist with a headset and a fixed smile directed me to a conference room at the end of a long, silent hallway. The plush carpet absorbed the sound of my footsteps, adding to the sense of unreality. Michael and Vanessa were already there, seated on one side of a massive mahogany table that gleamed under recessed lighting. They stood up when I walked in, their faces arranged in expressions of solicitous concern. It was a well-rehearsed act. "Mom, you made it," Michael said, coming forward to give me a stiff, awkward hug. His cologne was overpowering. "This is Mr. Peterson." Mr. Peterson was a man in his 50s with silver hair, a deep tan, and a watch that probably cost more than my first car.
He shook my hand, his grip firm and his smile predatory. Mrs. Wilson, a pleasure. Thank you for coming. It's so wise of you to take these proactive steps for your family's future. It's never too late to get organized, I said, my voice placid. I took a seat opposite them, placing my handbag on the empty chair beside me. I was a lone island in a sea of their ambition. I felt their eyes on me, assessing, waiting. The meeting began. Mr. Peterson launched into a smooth, rehearsed monologue about market volatility, tax implications, and the importance of a seamless generational wealth transfer. He used a lot of jargon, words designed to confuse and overwhelm. I nodded along, looking attentive, occasionally asking a simple, clarifying question that made him pause. So, this revocable trust, you mentioned, that means it can be changed at any time? Exactly, Mr. Peterson beamed, clearly thinking I was following his intended path. It offers flexibility as circumstances change. Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. See, Mom? It's all about making things easier down the road. If, you ever needed someone to step in and help manage things, a structure like this makes it simple. No courts, no fuss. I see, I said. No fuss. That's what they wanted. A quiet, no-fuss takeover of my life. Vanessa chimed in, her voice dripping with counterfeit sincerity. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Eleanor, that you never have to worry about a thing. We'd handle all the bills, the property taxes, everything, so you can just relax and enjoy your retirement. It was a pretty picture they painted. Me, a dottery old woman, contentedly knitting in a rocking chair while they managed my fortune. The reality, I knew, was far darker. It involved selling my home, the repository of my life's memories, and moving me into a facility where I would be out of sight and out of mind. They weren't planning for my retirement, they were planning for my obsolescence. The expert, Mr. Peterson, continued his presentation, using a whiteboard to draw complicated diagrams of financial structures. He talked about power of attorney, about healthcare directives, about naming a successor trustee. In every scenario he presented, the threads of control led inexorably back to Michael. I let them talk. I watched them, a director observing a scene. I saw the impatience in the way Michael tapped his pen, the hungry gleam in Vanessa's eyes as Mr. Peterson mentioned the current market value of my property. They were so close they could taste it. Finally, after nearly 45 minutes, Mr. Peterson slid a heavy, leather-bound portfolio across the table toward me. So, he said, his voice full of finality, this is the structure we recommend. It's a comprehensive trust that consolidates your assets and names Michael as co-trustee with full rights to manage the estate should you become incapacitated. It's the standard, most effective way to proceed. All it needs is your signature. He pushed a heavy, gold-plated pen next to the portfolio. This was it. The moment of attack. The ambush had been sprung. I looked at the documents, I looked at the pen, I looked at my son, his face a mask of eager anticipation. I looked at his wife, who was already mentally redecorating my house. Then I smiled. A real smile this time. A slow, calm, deliberate smile. And I began my own performance. I folded my hands on the polished surface of the table, ignoring the expensive pen and the leather-bound trap they had laid for me. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I began, my voice clear and carrying in the quiet room. That was a very thorough presentation. You've given me a lot to think about. Michael leaned forward, unable to contain himself. The veneer of patience was gone. There's nothing to think about, Mom. It's the smart thing to do. We're all here. We can get it done today. I agree, I said, turning my gaze to him. His eyes widened in surprise. It is the smart thing to do. In fact, it's so smart that I already did it. The silence in the room was absolute.
Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Michael and Vanessa stared at me, their faces frozen on their faces like gargoyles. Mr. Peterson's professional demeanor faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion.
I reached into my handbag and pulled out my own slim folder. It was simple, professional, and utterly confident. I placed it on the table with a soft, definitive thud that seemed to echo in the stillness. I appreciate you inviting me here today, I continued, my voice as calm as a summer lake. I saw it as an excellent opportunity to get a second opinion. You see, I established my own trust 6 months ago. I slid the folder, not to Michael, but directly to the expert, Mr. Peterson. I'd be very interested to hear your professional opinion on my arrangements. His hand hesitated for a moment before he picked it up. He opened the folder. As his eyes scanned the first page, I watched his face. The slick, predatory confidence drained away, replaced by genuine, undisguised shock. His expensive tan seemed to pale. He flipped the page, his eyes moving faster now, scanning the dense legal text. I knew what he was seeing, the clear, unambiguous language drafted by David Chen. He licked his lips, a nervous gesture that betrayed his composure. "It's an irrevocable trust," he murmured, almost to himself. He looked up at me, a new grudging respect in his eyes. "You're the sole trustee." He flipped another page and then froze. I knew he had reached the masterpiece, the coercion clause. He read it silently, his lips moving slightly. He looked at Michael and Vanessa, who were now staring at him, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. He looked back at me. Then, at that precise moment, 3 phones in the room buzzed simultaneously with an email notification. Mine, Michael's, and Mr. Peterson's. It was 10:30 a.m. I glanced at my phone. The subject line was clear. Donation confirmation, the Richard Wilson Memorial Fund. Michael fumbled for his phone, his hands suddenly clumsy. I watched as he read the email. I watched the blood drain from his face. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing silently, like a fish gasping for air. The $100,000 they had likely already mentally spent was gone, turned into a plaque on a hospital wall. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat, closing my folder with a quiet snap. He pushed it gently back toward the center of the table. He was no longer their ally. He was a professional, and he knew a checkmate when he saw one. "Mrs. Wilson?" he said, his voice now stripped of all its earlier condescension. It was pure, unadulterated respect. "This is one of the most well-structured, thoroughly protected trusts I have ever seen in my 30-year career." He turned his gaze to Michael and Vanessa, who were now staring at him, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. He turned his gaze back to me. "And this clause here," he tapped the folder, "this coercion clause is a work of art." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Frankly, there is nothing for me to add. My services here are not required." Vanessa finally found her voice, a shrill, ugly sound in the pristine office. "What? What does that mean? What did she do?" I decided to answer her myself. "It means, Vanessa," I said, my voice gentle but laced with ice, "that my affairs are in order. They have been for quite some time. It also means that any beneficiary who attempts to pressure or coerce me into changing my arrangements—" I let my eyes drift to the useless leather portfolio they had prepared— "immediately and permanently forfeits any claim to my estate." I stood up, my back straight, my head held high. "The meeting is over. Thank you all for your time." I picked up my handbag and my folder, turned around, and walked out of that cold, silent room without a backward glance. The war was over. I had won.
The drive home was the exact opposite of the drive there. I rolled down the windows, letting the cool gray air rush in. I turned on the radio, and an old Motown song was playing, a song Richard and I used to dance to in the kitchen. I sang along, my voice a little rusty, but full of a triumphant joy I hadn't felt in years. I was free. I didn't hear from them for the rest of the day. I imagined the scene in that conference room after I left, the accusations, the panic. I imagined the furious, silent car ride home. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. My peace was interrupted by a phone call late that afternoon. It was David Chen. "So," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice, "how did the performance go?" I replied, "The critics were speechless." He called me. He said the transfer was successful. And Mr. Peterson's office called me about 30 minutes ago. A very flustered paralegal wanting to verify the authenticity of a trust document. I assured her it was as real as the floor beneath her feet. He chuckled. "You, my dear Eleanor, have kicked the hornet's nest." "I didn't kick it, David. I sealed it in a jar and threw it in the ocean." We talked for a few more minutes, confirming the final steps. The trust was solid. My home, my savings, my life, they were all protected under a legal shield of my own making. The first direct contact from the enemy came the next day. It was a text from Michael. "We need to talk." I simply replied, "There is nothing left to say." Then came the phone calls. First from Michael, pleading, then demanding. Then from Vanessa, her voice alternating between syrupy fake apologies and venomous accusations that I was destroying the family. I didn't answer. I let the calls go to voicemail, a growing collection of their desperation. I learned through the grapevine, a call from my nervous sister-in-law Beatrice, that they had consulted their own lawyer. The lawyer, after apparently reviewing the situation, had told them what David and I already knew. They had no case. They had walked, with eyes wide open, directly into the trap I had set. Their own actions, hiring the planner, preparing documents, holding the meeting, were the very evidence needed to trigger the coercion clause. Their last desperate attempt was to try and have me declared mentally incompetent. This came to my attention via a call from my family doctor of 25 years, Dr. Evans. "Eleanor," he said, his voice weary, "your son and his wife were just in my office. They were expressing deep concern for your erratic behavior and cognitive decline." I felt a flash of white-hot anger. "And what did you tell them, Robert?" He told them, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, that I had just played my weekly game of chess with you last Tuesday and that you beat me in 12 moves. I told them that you are sharper than most people half your age, and that if they ever brought such a baseless, insulting accusation into my office again, I'd report them for elder abuse. A laugh escaped my lips, a genuine, hearty laugh. My allies were everywhere, a quiet army of decent people who had known me for years. After that, the calls stopped. The silence was absolute. They had exhausted their options. They had lost, and they knew it. A few weeks later, I received a final, formal-looking letter. It was from a lawyer I didn't know. It stated that Michael and Vanessa Wilson would be ceasing all contact and that any future communication should go through his office. It was their white flag of surrender.
I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I just felt quiet. The storm had passed. I had weathered it, and my house was still standing. The silence from Michael and Vanessa was a heavy blanket. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was an angry, resentful one. I knew I had done the right thing, the only thing I could do, but a part of my heart, the part that would always be a mother, ached for the son I had lost. Not to death, but to something far uglier: greed. The true cost of their actions became clear in the small, heartbreaking ways. Jamie's visits, which had been a constant Saturday joy, suddenly became fraught with difficulty. Vanessa would claim he was sick or had a last-minute birthday party to attend. The excuses were flimsy, transparent attempts to punish me by using my grandson as a pawn. But they underestimated Jamie. He would call me himself, using his dad's old tablet, his little voice whispering, "Grandma, I'm not sick. Can you please come get me?" And I would. I'd drive over there, my jaw set, and wait on their doorstep until a sullen Vanessa would finally push Jamie out the door, his little backpack clutched in his hand. We never spoke. The hate in her eyes was a physical thing. It was during this strained period that I got the phone call I was least expecting. It was Carol again, Vanessa's mother. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice small. "The whole thing. Vanessa, she called me, screaming, blaming you, blaming Michael, blaming me, blaming the whole world for her problems." "I'm sorry you were dragged into it, Carol," I said quietly. "Don't be," she said with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime. "I dragged myself into it when I raised a daughter who values things more than people." There was a long pause. Can I see you, Eleanor? I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. I feel like I owe you that much." We met at a small neutral diner halfway between our houses. She looked older than I remembered, the lines of worry etched deeper around her mouth. She told me stories about Vanessa's childhood, about a constant gnawing need for more, for better. The best clothes, the most popular friends, the richest boyfriend. She spoke of the arguments with her own husband, now deceased, about how they were spoiling her. "He saw it," she said, staring into her cold coffee. "He said, 'We're building a pretty house with no foundation,' and he was right." When he died, the first thing she asked about was his life insurance, before we'd even planned the funeral. The confession was a sad, hollow thing. It didn't make me feel better, but it made me understand. Vanessa wasn't a monster who had appeared out of nowhere. She was the product of a lifetime of misplaced values, a cautionary tale sitting right across from me. It wasn't just her, I admitted, the words tasting like ash. Michael, he let it happen. He stood by and let it all happen. "They found each other," she said simply. "Weakness and greed. It's an old story." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cool, but her grip was firm. "You did what you had to do," she said. "You protected yourself, and you protected that little boy. You're a good woman, Eleanor." We sat in silence for a moment. Two mothers from opposite sides of a battlefield, united in a strange, sad understanding. There was no victory in this, not really. Just the wreckage of a family and the quiet duty to pick up the pieces and protect the innocent ones left behind. As I left the diner, I knew there was one final thing I had to do. The trust was secure, but it needed one last amendment, a final, definitive statement that would echo far into the future, long after I was gone. It was time to rewrite the future, for good. A week later, I had Jamie over on a bright Saturday afternoon. I didn't want to meet with lawyers or sit in a stuffy office. This moment needed to happen here, in my home, surrounded by the life I had built. I led him to the living room where a small, beautifully crafted wooden box sat on the coffee table. It was made of solid oak with a sturdy brass lock. I had commissioned it from a local craftsman. It was simple, strong, and built to last, like the legacy I intended to pass on. "Jamie," I said, sitting beside him on the sofa. His eyes grew wide as he looked at the box. "Is it a pirate's treasure chest, Grandma?" I smiled. "In a way, yes, it's a treasure, but it's not the kind with gold coins." I took his small hands in mine. They were still so soft, so innocent. You know that Grandma worked very hard her whole life, right? And Grandpa Richard, too. We saved our money so we could have this house and be safe and take care of our family. He nodded seriously. You told me. Well, I continued, my voice steady, when I'm gone one day, a long, long time from now, everything I have will be yours. This house, the money in the bank, all of it. It's your inheritance. I watched his face, but the word meant nothing to him yet, and that was good. But this box, I said, tapping the lid, holds something more important. It holds the legal papers that make sure everything is protected for you, and it holds a letter for me. You can't open it until you are 25 years old. It's very important that you wait. I handed him the key, a small, ornate brass key on a leather cord. You are the keeper of this key, Jamie. It's a very big responsibility. Do you think you can handle it? He puffed out his little chest. I can handle it, Grandma. I know you can. I paused, wanting him to understand the heart of the matter. Jamie, money is just a tool. It can build things or it can break things. The real treasure isn't the money. The real treasure is knowing how it was earned, with honesty and hard work. It's about being a person who can be trusted. It's about protecting your family and always doing the right thing, even when it's hard. I knew he didn't understand all of it now, but I was planting a seed. The letter in the box would explain everything else when he was old enough. It would tell the full story of what his parents had tried to do. It would detail my heartbreak and my resolve. It would also contain my final, notarized amendment to the trust. That amendment established a subtrust for Jamie's benefit, to be managed by David Chen until Jamie turned 25. It explicitly and by name bypassed Michael and Vanessa entirely. It stated that any legal challenge to the trust's validity from any party, including any future attempt to gain custody of Jamie's inheritance, would result in the immediate forfeiture of the entire estate to a list of specified charities. It was my final checkmate, a move that would protect Jamie even from beyond the grave. In that moment, I knew I had done it. I had secured my legacy. It wasn't in the numbers in a bank account. It was here, in this room, in the heart of this little boy. It was the story of a woman who refused to be erased, a grandmother who fought for the future. And that was a treasure worth more than all the money in the world. 2 years have passed since that day. The silence from Michael and Vanessa has remained unbroken. I see them sometimes, at a distance, when I pick up Jamie from school on my designated days. They look diminished. The expensive clothes seem to hang off them. Their faces are tight with a permanent low-grade anger. They never meet my eye. They lost more than an inheritance. They lost their dignity, their family, their son's unfiltered respect. My life, on the other hand, has blossomed. The quiet of my house is no longer heavy with dread, but filled with a peaceful contentment. Sarah and I have our weekly card games. I volunteer at the hospital in the new cardiac wing named for my Richard. My days are my own, governed by my own choices, my own desires. And every Saturday, without fail, my true legacy comes through the door. Jamie is 10 now, tall and lanky, with the same kind eyes he's always had. The wooden box sits in the bottom of my cedar chest, and the key, he tells me, is hidden in a secret place in his room. He understands its importance, not as a source of wealth, but as a symbol of my trust in him. Today we are in the garden. It's a bright August afternoon, and we are planting a young oak tree in the far corner of the yard. It'll take a long time to get big, won't it, Grandma? He asks, patting the soil around the base of the sapling. The best things always do, sweetheart, I tell him, handing him the watering can. It needs good soil, a lot of sunshine, and strong roots, just like people.
He looks up at me and smiles. And in that smile, I see the future. I see a young man who will grow up knowing the difference between value and price. A man who understands that true strength isn't about taking, but about building. A man who will one day sit under the shade of this very tree, perhaps with his own children, and tell them the story of his grandmother. I watch him, my heart full. I didn't just win a fight, I reclaimed my life. I learned that kindness without boundaries is a liability, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to build a wall to protect what is sacred. My legacy isn't written on a legal document locked in a box. It's written in the laughter of my grandson, in the peace of my garden, in the quiet strength I found within myself when I was tested. And that is more than enough. That is everything. Thank you for listening to my story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. Does any part of this resonate with you? Have you ever had to fight to protect what was rightfully yours? I would be honored to read your thoughts in the comments below.